Yep, the title and thumbnail don't lie. I am almost 100% positive that almost all the people watching this video, possibly including you, do not know most of the facts I'll tell you throughout this video. I mean, hey, I just learned some of these facts for myself, which is exactly why I'm starting this series, because I'm a rather huge Sonic fan and I love searching through lots of media-related content. If you're curious about why I'm doing this exactly, it was during my search on the Sonic 3 and Knuckles page that I decided to ask my community if I should. Clearly, a lot of the votes agreed that this seemed like a really cool idea, so I decided to not only share my knowledge with you, but do it in a way so that, if you feel like it, you could fall asleep to this. Does this mean that in the future I'll make a compilation video on all the games I talked about, and then maybe branch out to some other popular series? Yes, if this series gets popular, but that's for later, not for right now. Right now, we're here to talk about some Sonic the Hedgehog facts you didn't know. Rules for this episode are that while we will talk about the other versions of Sonic the Hedgehog, we'll be mainly discussing the Genesis Mega Drive original. So with everything above out of the way, let's get into the Sonic the Hedgehog facts that you probably don't know. First off, the thumbnail doesn't lie, as Sonic 1 was first released on June 11th of 1991, not June 23rd. However, this was only for the US, as the EU version did come out on the 23rd of June, and the Japanese version on the 26th of July. Speaking of Japan, let's talk about a fun fact you might have heard of, which is that there are secret credits you can only unlock in the Japanese version of the game. By pressing C 6 times, then up, then down 3 times, then left, and then right on the title screen, you should hear a ring noise. When the gameplay demo starts, hold the down key, along with A, B, and C, to make the secret credits screen appear. However, that's for the Japanese version on a Japanese Mega Drive. For international versions running on a Japanese Mega Drive, press C 6 times, then up, then down, then left, then right. Now, you may be asking why this screen exists, which is a good question, and to answer that, Yuji Naka added it in defiance of Sega, which prohibited developers from using their real names on credit screens. So, because of the Sega rule, we have a rather unique secret in Sonic the Hedgehog. Thankfully, this no real names on credits rule was thrown out by the time the 8-bit version of Sonic 1 was developed. Now that we're done with developer-related secrets, let's move on to some music-related secrets, with unused music sequences in some of the songs that sound similar to demo versions made by Masato Nakamura, the composer of Sonic 1 and 2. Before we start, I just want to briefly explain what an unused music sequence means. Basically, imagine that instead of a full song, only a few notes or one part of a song is unused. Hopefully that explains it well. I'm not trained on the subject, so I may be slightly off. But anyways, onto the unused music sequences, starting with the least different to the most different. The least different would be the Act Clear jingle, with an unused trumpet noise in the song that is similar to Masa's demo version. I'll play the used version first, and then the unused version. Notice the difference? If not, don't worry. This next one is a lot more obvious if you compare the two of them. The next one is the boss theme, which has a different bass noise that is similar to Masa's demo version. Once again, I'll play the version that was used in the game first, and then the unused version with a different bass. Notice the difference? If not, don't worry. This final one is the most obvious of all of them. This final one is for the credits theme of the game, which is a different ending compared to the used version. I'll play the used version first before playing the slightly longer unused version with a different ending. Now that that's over, let's move on to a quick thing you might not have known regarding the pre-release history of Sonic the Hedgehog, which is that the lava design in Marble Zone went through several changes. I'll quickly show you each design, going from the later ones to the earliest versions, starting with the one used in the Sega Shinsaku Soft video. At this point in the game's development, the game was almost finished, so it's not exactly surprising to see that the lava looks pretty much identical to the one used in the final game. That also goes for the lava design revealed in the Game Player's Sega Genesis Strategy Guide Volume 2 Number 3, which to me looks a little less like the one used in the game, but not by much. The next build, however, has a very different lava design, this build being the ones that are similar to the Winter CES build. Now there are some more along with this, but I can't identify which builds they are from, so I'll just include them now. And with that, we're done with the lava and Marble Zone, which means we are pretty much done with the whole of pre-release material. But that doesn't mean we're completely done with pre-release material. Here's something you probably didn't know. Just like Sonic the Hedgehog 2, there are unused level ideas for Sonic the Hedgehog 1, and wow, are some very different from the released game. To save some time, I'll go over the most interesting ones, like this weird science-themed stage which looks radically different from the rest of the game. Another interesting idea would have been a space stage that apparently would have had higher jump height for Sonic. Along with that, it would have been a two-player stage, an idea that was first introduced in Sonic 2. Other than that though, nothing else is notable except for the fact that this idea later turned into Starlight Zone. Now before we get to probably the newest fun fact regarding unused stage ideas, let's talk about Chinese World, which is the only one of these to have an actual official name except for the one coming up after this one. The main gimmick-like idea presented in this image was the idea of an obstacle throwing fireballs surrounding the platform above the half-pipe, which was added into Spring Yard Zone, although the fireballs were replaced with spiked metal balls. And finally, the one I just hyped up, and the one that you might recognize, is Metallic Stage, which apparently was meant to have a, and I quote, Southeast Asian feel. If this looks familiar, that's because this idea was surprisingly reprised for Golden Capital Zone in Sonic Superstars, using the same graphical designs as seen in this concept. Before we leave concept-related material behind, let's talk about some more concepts that are on level with the unused level designs, those being the designs that were made before the Sonic the Hedgehog band was scrapped. To explain, there was an idea early on that Sonic would be in a band and would have to save his bandmates and the animals. This idea apparently got so far in development to where some graphics were drawn. Unfortunately, these have not been seen as of this video coming out. And yes, before you ask in the comments, the crocodile character is the original design for Vector the Crocodile, and the band did appear in the Sonic tie-in manga. Also, fun fact, they, for some reason, appeared in actual proper form in Sega Sonic Bros., although their sprites were unused in that game, which itself was never properly released. Anyways, back to the concept art. Let's start with this one of the title screen, which shows Sonic leaning on the Sega logo, only for Sonic to fall backwards after the logo slides over to the left. After this, the screen would have been covered in, presumably, stripes that were to be brought in by both Robotnik and Sonic's band, before the giant Sonic emblem falls in place from the top of the screen. Personally, I really like this Sonic design a lot more than the one used on the actual title screen. But anyways, on to another idea that was reused later on. This concept art shows the idea for a construction-themed mid-boss, which held one of Sonic's bandmates and their respective animal species. Sonic would have to dodge a giant wrecking ball as he used two platforms to destroy the machine. After the machine is destroyed, a small cutscene would play where Sonic and a respective bandmate would cheer. The idea of several bosses in one was partially reused in Sonic 3, specifically in Launch Base and Death Egg. However, the original idea presented here has not been reused as of now, to my knowledge. Here's an unused idea for the final boss that was apparently also considered for the 8-bit Sonic 1 game. This idea also went unused in that game as well. Speaking of the 8-bit Sonic 1 game, we'll get into that game very soon, but before we have to talk about one more concept piece that was reused. This idea is Sonic falling from the sky after defeating the final boss and getting saved by one of his friends. For this concept, that friend is Sharps the Chicken, and the reused version, that friend is Tails the Fox. With concept art over, we now move on to the 8-bit Sonic 1 game, which is the last officially released game for the US version of the Master System. Now, you might have thought we were done with music, but no. as there are some songs that were planned to be used in 8-bit Sonic 1 that weren't. I'll play those now. And finally for Sonic 1 8-bit are these two unused sprites. You may ask why I'm showing you these, and the answer is because they were found in pre-release screenshots. We'll talk about this one first, as it's just confusing considering no known version of Sonic 1 8-bit released in 1992, not even any Game Gear or US versions. The second one is even more odd, because it's actually different from the unused sprite we have. If you look closely, you'll see that everything after Sega has been heavily moved over. Either this is a separate version of this sprite made for the Master System, or this is an early version of this sprite, which itself is an early version of the used sprite. And finally, here's one more fun fact about the Sonic 1 8-bit version that you probably didn't know. The Game Gear version was developed after the Sega Master System version, which is why in early pre-release screenshots you can see the Master System sprites for Sonic in the Game Gear version of the game. The Game Gear version would get their own, in my opinion better, Sonic sprites along with some other changes to accommodate the small screen size. With the Sonic 1 8-bit section of this video over, we can now briefly talk about the I-Mode and J2ME versions of Sonic 1, which feature this unused UFO frame from the prototype version of Sonic 1. And now, back to the Genesis version to tell you that you might have thought we were finally done with the music, but no, there are some pre-release music changes as well. First of all, let's start with this version of Green Hill that was used for the very early demos, including the Tokyo Toy Show demo. Pretty different, right? Let's see if the special stage theme is also just as different as the original Green Hill theme. Okay, not as different, but still somewhat different. Let's see if Sparkling Zone, the early name for Spring Yard, also has any noteworthy differences in its original composition. okay, not so much, but there are still some differences if you listen hard enough. If you want to hear a modified version made by Zoink Noise, link is in the description. And with that, this video comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed, and sorry if you already knew all this information. I barely hear people talk about these parts of Sonic 1's history and decided to bring them up. If this series gets popular, then I absolutely will continue this, as Sonic 2, Sonic 3 Knuckles, and more have loads of fun facts just like this to talk about. So, with that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and hopefully I'll see you again next time. Goodbye, everybody!